Hey guys, this is Miss Harlequin, and in this video we're going to be going over the questions for the test passage Ring of Horses, which comes from the 2014 New York State ELA exam for 6th grade. Alright, so the first question is, which phrase best explains why people first created carousels? So when I go back into the passage, I find this paragraph starting with line 19. And this is where they start to talk about the first carousel being created. It's the first carousel-like contraption. It was created in France, and it was designed to help men practice for their little war games. So this is an example of a question that basically you can find specific text evidence in the passage to give you the answer. So I'm looking for something that matches little war games. That's why the first carousel was created. Was it created to provide people with a thrilling ride? No, it wasn't. Was it a training device for soldiers? Well, if they refer to it as a little war game, war, soldiers kind of goes hand in hand, so this might be the answer. Put a little dot as a possibility. Was it first created to display carved animals? No, they do talk about carved animals in later versions of the carousel, but this is clearly not the first. Is it a game for horses? No. It is a game, but it's a war game for the people playing it, not for the horses. So that means that my best answer choice was answer choice B. All right, the next question. What made more elaborate carousels possible? All right, so I'm going to break this question down a little bit before I even look for an answer. When you describe something as elaborate, elaborate is really complicated, really complex. It's the opposite of simple. So what we're really doing is we're looking for either the word elaborate in the passage, although that's probably not going to be found. That would be too simple. But we're looking for descriptions of carousels that are a little bit more complicated than maybe when they first were invented. So when I go back into the passage, I find this paragraph starting with line 29. Gustave Denzel began building the first carousels in America in the 1860s, powered by steam engines. These carousels moved faster and held more weight than the old model, allowing for a more lavishly decorated machine. So if it's more decorated, then that's probably related to elaborate. It's the opposite of simple. If you have more decorations, not having a lot of decorations would be simple. Having more decorations would be elaborate. And then the next sentence kind of confirms that, because it talks about how they carved and painted a variety of animals for the carousels. So if the carousels had a lot of animals on them, that definitely sounds more elaborate. So why are these carousels able to have all of these animals on them where before they couldn't? Well, they can hold more weight, and that's because of the steam engines. So are there new kinds of animals? That doesn't even make sense. New kinds of animals. A new source of power. Well, they're powered by steam engines. And if I even use my prior knowledge, I know that in the 1860s, that's when there is more technology starting to develop. So this is a possible answer, probably the answer. The addition of a chariot? No, that has nothing to do with the text evidence I found. The inclusion of brass rings? No, that doesn't make it elaborate, and that's not in this paragraph. It's in another part of the text. So my answer choice is B. All right, next question. Based on the entire article, the word lavishly in line 31 shows that the carousels were. All right, so this is the same paragraph I just looked at. We talked about how the carousels were more decorated, more lavishly decorated. And we talked about how this part of the paragraph really connected to the previous question, asking about the carousels becoming more elaborate. Now, when they're more decorated, the next sentence talks about how they have all these animals on them. So when they're lavishly decorated, is it that they're faster? No, that has nothing to do with decoration. Larger than they had been? Again, that doesn't really have to do with decoration. Fancier than they had been? Well, if they are adding and making them more elaborate, if something is the opposite of simple, it could be fancier. And all of these additions could make for a fancier carousel. Stronger. Well, even just the fact that I can eliminate all these other ones, they have nothing to do with decorating. Fancier is the only thing that is even closely related to decorating, so that has to be the answer. All right, next we've got how do the details about the Great Depression in lines 40 through 43 contribute to the development of the article? Now, when they ask you a question like this, they're basically asking you, what do you learn from these lines or from this paragraph that relates to the central idea? How does this paragraph kind of build on the central idea? So I've read the passage and I know that this is about the evolution of the carousel. What do I learn about the evolution of the carousel that if this paragraph wasn't there, I wouldn't know? Carousels were so popular that nearly 4,000 were built from 1860 to 1930. Okay, so they're popular. A lot of them were built. But when hard times came upon America during the Great Depression in the 1930s, few people had money to spend on extras. Okay, I think that's a very key idea. The Depression meant that people could not spend money on carousels. Before the Great Depression, there had been 4,000. Many carousels stopped being used, and they fell into disrepair, and no one could afford to fix them. Some were even taken apart and put into storage. So this is actually about the decline of the carousel, and it's all because of the Great Depression and the fact that people didn't have money. So do these lines form a mental image of an abandoned carousel? No. In order for there to be a mental image, you would have to have descriptive language, and there's really no descriptive language here. By describing for readers the costs involved in running a carousel. They do talk about money. I'm a little bit tempted, so I'm just going to put a dot here and come back to it. By creating curiosity about where the carousels were stored. No, I'm not curious about that, and it's only briefly mentioned. And they only mention putting it into storage because that highlights the fact that the carousels have decreased in popularity and use. By providing an explanation for the decline of carousels. All right, this one really feels right to me because even, think about what I did when I got to the end of the paragraph. I drew this little down arrow and I talked about, in summing it up, that this paragraph was all about the decrease of carousels. So now, if I think about it, and I go back to this one that I was tempted by, I kind of, even at the time that I put the dot here, knew that this kind of wasn't it. This is the trick answer. They use the word cost, and they want you to think about how they talk about money and how people didn't have it. But they never really get into specifics about how much the carousel cost. It's not even that the carousels were necessarily expensive to run. That doesn't really say that. They're just saying people didn't have money to spend on extra things, even if those extra things weren't that, costly. So this is the best answer choice. Okay, next. What does the history of the word carousel reveal about the modern day carousel? All right, so the whole article was about the history of carousels. Does it show that carousels were once used for training? Yes, that's true. They were once used for training. Now they've been put into storage. Well, if I go back to the end of the article, they talk here in the Great Depression section about how they've been put into storage. And in the last paragraph, they talk about how a lot of the carousels are a lot less. Remember, in the previous paragraph, there were 4,000 before the Great Depression. And now there's about 150 that are back in service. But up until then, they had been put in storage. And since there's only 150 that have been restored, that means that they're still in storage. So this is a very tempting answer. I know that it's true. Carousels were once celebrated for their beauty. They might be beautiful, but they never said they were celebrated for their beauty. Now they have fallen into disrepair. That's true, but the first part wasn't true, so this cannot be the answer. Carousels were once used for military practice. Yeah, they played war games. Now they're used for entertainment. This is very tempting. Let me go back and check that. Were they really used for military practice? All right, if I go back to that paragraph, they do say Little War Games. Does that necessarily mean that the military was using it? I mean, this could have been that men were using it on their own. Like they might have been soldiers and they might have been practicing war, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the official military or government was using it. So Even though this is kind of true, I think this is the distractor answer. It's meant to trick you. And even this, they're used for entertainment. Yeah, that is true, except what's more true? Is the modern day carousel used for entertainment, or is it mostly in storage? Well, if we look at that last paragraph, there's only 150 out of 4,000 that used to exist. So it's more that most of them are in storage more than they're used for entertainment. So, tempting answer, but really putting the thought and thinking it through makes me realize I'm not going to be tricked. I'm going to go with A. And let me just check D, though. Carousels were often appreciated for their decoration. No, that's not true. Now they're used for amusement. All right, here's another reason why I'm going to eliminate. These two are very similar to each other. And when you have answer choices that are too similar, then they can't both be correct. So we're going to go with A. All right, last question. Which statement best expresses the author's point of view in the article? So when we talk about the author's point of view, that is another word for perspective. How does the author feel about the topic that they wrote about? So how does the author feel about carousels? The carousel is an exciting and fascinating piece of history. All right, let's think about that. Is the carousel exciting from the author's descriptions? I mean, there were some exciting descriptions. I never knew they were used for war games. That's kind of exciting. I mean, especially when I think about how mostly children like to go on carousels in more modern times. Is it a fascinating piece of history? Yeah, again, learning about how they were used for war and now they're used for entertainment and children, and it's more elaborate than when they first were invented. That's definitely a fascinating piece of history. It's not boring. I am tempted with this one, so I'm going to put a dot here as a possibility. The work to restore and preserve carousels has been completed. Absolutely not true. Only 150 have been restored, and there were 4,000 before. The first carousels in Europe were more beautiful than later ones. No. I never saw any evidence that the author preferred certain carousels. He doesn't really give opinions like that. The National Carousel Association can do more to save the carousel. All right, and finally we have the National Carousel Association can do more to save the carousel. All right. Let's go back and actually look at that last paragraph. I want to review because I know that's where they mention the National Carousel Association. These beautiful machines had nearly disappeared when in the 1970s people began to realize the importance of keeping the magic of the carousel alive for future generations. Enthusiasts formed the National Carousel Association and the American Carousel Society to raise money, restore, and preserve wooden carousels. Thanks to their efforts, today about 150 antique carousels are back in service. All right, so I don't really see the author putting down the National Carousel Association. In fact, you'll see I put a box around where the author is thanking them, saying thanks to their efforts, like they're doing a good job. So that can't mean that he is criticizing them and thinks that they can do more. They're doing what they can, and thank you for what they're doing. So this is not the answer. So we're going to go with A. The carousel is an exciting and fascinating piece of history. And when I think back on the actual article, I do feel like this is mostly what I learned from the passage.